topics and opinions expressed in the following show are solely those of the hosts and their guests and not those of W4CY Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4CY Radio or its employees or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4CY Radio.
To Triversity Talk. I'm your host, Wendy Stewart. It's Wendy on Wednesday. Glad to have you all here with me tonight. Today was an amazing day. I'm broadcasting live from New York City. The weather has just been incredible, and there's been so much going on. I'm sure many of you have been following what's been going on with the huge protests that were on Saturday in New York. But you know, Triversity is our LGBTQ in Milford, Pennsylvania. And we had yet another protest there on Saturday and another wonderful turnout. I also want to give a shout out here to our executive director, Taylor James, for speaking so eloquently at the school board meeting. I'm based in New York. I'm in Milford, Pennsylvania on weekends. I was not able to attend the school board meeting, but for many people in the LGBTQ community, if you're following what is going on with school boards all around the country right now, it's a little scary. So we really appreciate people that attend those meetings, people that listen, and people that speak out about equality. And I shall end it right at that. So tonight's guest is somebody I happened to meet at an event at the Copa in New York. It's a show called 50 Shades of Gay. And when the show was over, they brought out these amazing dancers, but more than dancers, this person that's coming on the show is magnetic. They're electric. Besides having incredible moves, you couldn't take your eyes off of them. Our guest tonight is an award-winning queer artist and event producer who loves to spread queer joy everywhere they go, and is going to be talking to us more than a little on pronouns and how they fit into our world now. So please welcome I.Dent.t.T.
Hello, hello, hello. Hi, Wendy, and hello, all the listeners.
This is like so fun because you were so done when I saw you at the Copa. Well, yeah, I guess I was too, right? And the beauty of podcasting is like we get to see another side of people.
That's right. That's right. Without the makeup running and the sweat and all that.
Oh, my makeup never runs. Just kidding. I don't sweat. But your performance was so great that night. And I love when people I go around telling everybody, I know everybody in New York, and people that know me will tell you that I do. I've been knocking around a long time. I go between New York and Brooklyn. My range of friends is from decades ago and current and all over the place. Okay. International, New York, wherever. So I'm like, how did you get past me, I.Dent.t.T? How did that happen?
Well,
You're not
I've been keeping it a secret this whole, I'm just super glad to meet you. You were so kind. And by the way, I know it was after all the performances in the shows. You looked fabulous, and you always look fabulous.
Well, thank you. And I can tell you why. I'm going to give a shout out to my friend, Bell Pepper, the drag performer, also known as John Stephen Hellman, who turned me onto this foundation that all the drag queens use, because I thought to myself, if it can cover 5 o'clock shadow, right, it can cover anything. And I really owe my whole look to being able for people not to see me sweat. There you go.
So there is a secret. Okay.
Well, don't we all have our secrets? So I think what is particularly interesting to me about you is, besides many things, your emphasis on the importance of pronouns. You when you introduce yourself, you have a massive Instagram channel, and for those of you watching, I highly recommend that you go see identities, and it's spelled out here for you, and you can see that there's a gazillion links. I've never seen so many links, and we need those links because they all take you to these. It's like traveling with identity, and it's super important. How did you get involved so much in the importance of pronouns?
Yeah, so I think this is I was part of a nonprofit called Query, which is queer theory, mashed up together, queer theory. And we want to make queer theories accessible because I don't know about you, but not everyone gets to go to college. And those of us who do get to go to college, queer theory may not have been something that was offered or something we could study. And so
I was in college so long ago that, I can't like judge it on that because it wouldn't have been around then. But is this something that is not part of the curriculum now?
it's really not for most schools. And so, yeah, so queer theory is essentially looking at the world through a queer lens, right? Through a non-cisgender, non-heterosexual lens. And it says that maybe the world could look a little different, right? Because it's designed for and by cishet folks, right? And so, anyway, so this nonprofit, we were playing with that, different ideas. And one day I said, what if we started playing with pronouns? What if we just encourage people to share their pronouns with those of us who are comfortable doing that? And that just became normal, right? Like saying, hey, Wendy, how are you? I don't expect you to really tell me how you are, right? I expect you to say, yeah, I'm fine. And then you go about your business. What if we just built that into our culture where we just say our pronouns, right? If that was comfortable enough. And then the pandemic came.
Oh, yeah.
And part of the pandemic pivoting was I was saying, we learned how to fist bump and elbow bump when we said hi to people, right? Because we didn't want to get too close because of the virus.
Right.
I said, as we started reintroducing ourselves back into social life, we could actually just use that as a way to say, hey, this is how I'm going to introduce myself from now on. And that's what I did personally in my life. So I'm a professor at a college. Every class I teach, I start off with, I'm Professor Young. I use he and they pronouns. When I perform as identity, I say, hey, my name is Identity, and I go by they, them pronouns. And I think part of it is it's about education, right? I think ignorance, hate, homophobia, whatever, transform, whatever you want to call it, I think the large part is ignorance, right? It's ignorance. And so if we learn about pronouns and learn how we use pronouns and learn how to respect other people, right? Or quote unquote other people, then we start realizing that this is something that's all part of us. My favorite thing that I hear from people that helps me know that I can help them, my favorite thing I hear from people is, I don't use pronouns. They quote unquote, they'll say, I don't use pronouns. And I'll say, well, we can talk about that because I is a pronoun.
Right.
You just did.
Words right out of my mouth, but you're the guest, so I let you say they already, right. Pronouns are a part of our everyday language. But the other side of the coin, and I've gotten this from, LGBTQ people of a certain age, I'll put it that way, probably my age, not me, but my age. They're like, why do we have to use all these pronouns? I don't get this. It doesn't mean anything to me. I think it's stupid. I don't understand why we need to do that. What do you say to people?
We don't need to do anything. And in fact, I would even say the pronoun conversation that I have with people is not even scratching the surface of talking about trans rights or gender nonconforming or non-binary people's experiences, right? It's some people might even argue this pronoun conversation is a distraction. But for me, I think it's a way to invite people into the conversation, to invite people in to have a conversation about what is it about pronouns? Because we all use pronouns.
Absolutely.
Right? I think it's a simple way to just say, we do this. And you don't have to use it when you introduce yourself. But over the 7 years I've been doing this, we were doing this before Instagram had an option to put in your pronouns. And we would teach people to put in your name and then add your pronouns afterwards. Now you can just click, right? Facebook allows you to click as well.
Right, but 7 years ago, we were at the very beginning of starting to look at pronouns. use pronouns. And then, of course, there will always be the people that question the use of having to use those pronouns with people. For
Yeah,
me,
and I would even, sorry, oh, go ahead.
yeah, it's just,
Sure.
it's a respect thing. Like you tell me how you want to be called. Like, I wouldn't want you to call me ma'am. No, that was a bad example. That, because people will
It
call.
works.
I'm using that as an example, right? You call me ma'am. I'm like, why did that person call me that? I don't like being called that. So when you're respecting people, right? I always ask, certainly with this show, what people's pronouns are, and God, you're making me sit here think I really am an ageism person, because people of a certain age, like my age, I don't ask them what their pronouns are. But when they're younger, I absolutely, every single person that I meet or that tells me they're queer or non-binary, my immediate response is, tell me what your pronouns are. That's interesting. This is
I love that you do that. And I think that's so the one thing I do is I try to do it in all my circles. And I'm not that great at it. I still need to work on it. But I want to create a world where I don't just assume I know. I think that's the issue, right? The issue is I assume by looking at you that this is what gender is.
Right.
And I don't know. And so that's one of the parts of the training, part of the conversation, right? Yeah.
Okay, well, I've got one for you that I mull about a lot in my head. You meet somebody and they tell you they're trans, except they look totally different than the sex that they're telling you they are, right? So now we're dealing with category, or, how we see things. Like if I show you an apple's an apple, an orange is an orange. Someone looks totally how we would identify what female is, right? Feminine attributes. But then they tell you they're male. That's when the pronouns, people get, and I talk to people a lot about this, they get tripped up on that. Yeah. How do you deal with that?
So I think there's some assumptions about what masculinity and femininity looks like.
Yeah.
And so that's partly why I'm going to answer your question for sure. But that's why when I took on this whole persona to perform, I came up with the name I.Dent.t.T. I gave they, them pronouns only, exclusively, partly to engage and have that conversation, because identity is something that's not static, right? I mean, right. I don't know about you, but my hair has not looked the same for decades, right?
Mine has
changes all the time.
For decades. I'm going to be honest. I used when I was 16, I used Sun-In, and that was the start of the blonde, and I've never been anything but blonde, but that's my thing. Go on.
But we do different things. We wear different things. We show us up in different ways. Maybe I'm more of an athlete now, maybe more of a couch potato, right? We have different. So just in general, identity is not static. When we're allowed to explore. In fact, we should explore who we are, because society has told us who we are. At least for me, society has told me who to be, and I adopted that. I thought that's who I was, right? I thought I had to subscribe to that. But to get to your question, if I see someone that quote unquote doesn't look that way, I think that's more about my own issue, right? Because people tell me all the time, well, you don't look Chinese, you look Japanese. Like,
what is that? I mean,
right? Like, so like from a racist perspective, from a transphobic perspective, people have told me all my life that I don't look like who I say I am. And I think the reason people say that is because they don't know who they are, and they don't know the society in which they live in are teaching them these binary
stereotypes. There's stereotypes.
Right. But, and so when it comes to gender, it's the same thing. And so what do I do with that? What I do is I think of it this way. People might look at me and say, you don't look like a James. But that's not true for me, because I look like a James to me, right?
You look like a James to me. You also look like, and I bet your name, I would know your name as you.
Right. But we should do the same thing with pronouns, is the point.
Right.
I can't tell you how many people over my life, Wendy, over my lifetime, and you won't be surprised, it's usually cis, straight, older, white men. I'll say my name is James, and they'll say, oh, it's nice to see you, Jim. Like they just take that and they decide that that's what I'm going to say, right? And I think pronouns is the same thing. It's a sign of not just respect, but also it's a sign of me understanding how do I see the world, and how do I understand the world, and how do I communicate and connect with other people. And so to be perfectly honest, if someone says she to me or about me, I'm not concerned about that. But I am concerned about people who are actively, willfully ignorant. And definitely within our own community, in the LGBTQIA plus community, there are some people who are just like, I don't need to have this conversation. I've had many conversations with
Let me
people like
tell
that.
you, there's a lot of them, because I have this conversation on the show a lot, and just out in my world, which is that world, I have this conversation all the time, and it's very interesting to me. I do think a lot's got to do with stereotypes and the expansiveness of one's mind. I'll put it to you that way. If your mind is expansive and you tell me something, like I may look at you and think, oh, yeah, James. I wouldn't have thought you were a James. I might have thought you were a Michael or whatever. But you told me your name was James. So guess what? It ends there.
That's right. That's right.
Thing with your pronouns. It ends when you tell me what your pronouns are. But I had a friend, and I'll mention on this show, and she passed away. And she was a wonderful person, and she was a great part of Triversity, of our organization. She the thing about her, we would go out to eat, and frequently the wait person would say to her, and sir, what would you like to have? So my friend would pull a card out that said, you have greatly offended me. You have misgendered my what I am, who I am and how I identify. And I would talk with her about that, because I did not think that was the best way to teach a lesson. And I'll tell you why. Because just in general in society, right, we present, we have we're like a painting. People see us and they make judgments about us. So if a person identifies one way but looks totally another, you can educate the person that has misgendered you without giving them a card saying you have greatly offended me. I don't know that that's the best way to go about it. And that's my personal opinion.
Can I speak on that a little bit?
Yeah, I want you to. That's why I'm throwing it into your universe.
I think anyone who identifies within the TGNCMB community might have a better statement about that. But I'm just going to add that, to my mind, however we deal with the oppressive society and how individual people react within that oppression, I think however we deal with it is how we deal with it. And I think there are different ways to deal with it. And I love that your friend did that. And I don't know what I would do if it was me, but I will tell you from a racial lens, when people do stuff with me about my race, sometimes I don't say anything. Sometimes I'm kind about it. Sometimes I pull out a PowerPoint and explain what's going on. But sometimes I'll get a little pissy, and sometimes I will get angry. Sometimes I will be snarky and throw something back. So it depends on the situation. And I don't think any of it's wrong per se, but I do think that this is partly why, as a cisgender person, I've taken this on, because I don't have to feel the same heat, same pressure as someone that's part of the TGNCMB community. And I also want to just go back to someone who doesn't look like their gender or what they say their gender is.
What we're taught about, you know, there are no matter what.
Because it's that still sits a little funny with me, because people again tell me that I look Japanese, and I'm like, what does that like? That's more about them. And I'm gonna wrap this part up and just say, I think what's really powerful about this is that the people who are making those uninformed conversations and uninformed statements,
yeah,
right? They are. I think they're trapped, and I think the conversation about gender, pronouns, all that stuff is not just to free and liberate trans people or gender nonconforming and non-binary people from having to deal with this. It's actually about freeing everyone, right? Liberation is for everyone, and when we can decolonize our own mind about gender and the binary system, we become freer, all of us.
I love using a word like decolonize our mind. That's great. That absolutely, because you're right. Or decompartmentalize our mind. If we decompartmentalize our mind. But okay, so let's look at where we are. By the way, I'm loving this conversation with you, because there's not the whole professor in you does come out, and your knowledge is great. And I love when I have someone on the show and I can pick their brain, right? So in the time that we're in right now, in the political situation that we're in now, and I'll just phrase it that way, how do we apply all of this in a meaningful way to not persuade, but to affect people so that they understand that their opinions are harmful, that they have to be empathetic, that people's pronouns mean something, and that the person in front of them is a human being that deserves respect.
Wow, that's a great question, Wendy. And before I answer, I just want to say I so appreciate you and Triversity and Juan, and you mentioned Taylor James. Thank you for all the work that you are doing, and also all those rallies and protests that are happening. And I think I mean, obviously, I don't have the answer, because if I did, things wouldn't look the way they
No,
are
but you've
today.
got great opinions. You
But
have
I-
strong
but, yeah,
opinions.
but my quick thinking is, I think we all have to do what works for us, right? And so I'm not showing up to those rallies in the same way as other people are, or even organizing them. And so this is where identity comes in, right? So I do it through my music and my performance. I have a new
Got it.
song coming out. The new song is called "Set Yourself Free."
Oh, you
Identity.
absolutely listen to it. That's a song people can vote on, right?
That's not it, actually. That's the one I did at the Copa, AURE, or, which stands for "We are ancient, we are universal, we are radiant, and we are eternal," referring to queer people. Because there's a lot of misinformation out there. So I use my music to share that. My most recent song that's coming out on May 1st is called "Set Yourself Free, Identity." And it's this challenge to people to think about, how can I love myself more to set myself free? Because if I do that, then I'm not looking at other people with so much hate and dagger and
Well, then you're going to love,
othering
if
them.
you love yourself more, you're going to love other people more.
Right. And so what's the conversation? What's the impact? I really don't know, but I will say this. I think we all have to do what works for us to the best of our abilities, because we can burn out, right? So we don't want to overstretch. We also want to make sure that we relax and connect with people like us today. How cool is it that we get to do that? We need to find queer joy wherever that is, or Black joy, or Asian joy. Like, we have to find, as people who are minoritized, right, find ways to find that joy, because if we don't, it's insufferable, right? And so I that's why I do the music I do, to try to get that. In the classroom, I do the same thing, and in my personal life, I do the same thing. Wendy, I can't tell you how many people I've seen on your pictures and whatnot that I'm just like, wow, totally queer vibes, love it, positive,
But joyful.
wonderful.
If for people that follow me, a lot of my friends got off of Facebook when the SHIT hit the fan, and they got off of Facebook, and I'm like, no, because I have consistently used my Facebook, especially during the pandemic, but now I use my Facebook to bring joy. Okay, I don't put a political statement on there. Everyone knows who I am and what I do and what rallies I'm at and what I stand for, but I made my page fun. I take great pictures of incredible people having joy at events. That's like, it's what you said. That's what I can do, right? That's what
And Wendy, I think you're onto something really powerful here, and what you do here with this podcast as well, which is, it's about building community.
Yeah.
Right? It's using creativity and building community. And I think that's where it's really at, right? It's yes, of course, like, we want to vote with our dollars, we want to do rallies and all the stuff. Definitely, yes. And I think we have to find each other and connect. I mean, that's what I did when I was 17, living on my own in New York, trying to figure out, are there other people like myself, right? It's really important for us to not fall into the idea that we are broken or that we are alone. We are not broken. We are not.
Oh my God, 150%. And people say to me all the time, how are you so involved with this community? How did you get so involved with this community? And I tell them all the same thing. I've always been there from the time I was 15, and the LGBTQ plus community, honestly, has always, and I have some wonderful friends that are allies as well, but this community has always had my back. I am not kidding you. I lost my husband a year ago. I didn't have one night where people weren't like, hey, come on, come out, let's have dinner. Do you want to come here? Oh, when are we going to see? Like, I was never alone. I never experienced loss. Sometimes when you lose a partner and you are isolated, it's awful anyway. But imagine being all alone with maybe just a couple of friends and some relatives, right? That's a lot of people's stories because that's normal life, right? Not someone, I have like 300 friends. These aren't even the Facebook ones. Like, I have a community around me at all times. I'm telling you, if I could move into a commune with all of them, James, I would 100% do that because I'm all about that. I love performing with other people. You saw all those people that applauded you that night. That's our crew, and we are extensive. We've got tentacles all over. How cool is that?
Well, when you're ready to have Identity come on a show, let me know. And
Absolutely.
coming back to the point, I think that's where it's at, right? It's about community. You've heard of blue zones. Blue zones, for those of the listeners who don't know, those are areas in the world where people live the longest and have the most quality out of life, not just years, but quality of life.
Right.
And they talk about it's about their diet, it's about this, it's about that. And one of the things that keeps coming up is their social interaction and their sense of community. And I think as a young queer person, I did not have that. And so what I turned to was music. And although I didn't have as much access to queer music back then, but my music was my friends. That's how I survived, right? I
Your
felt the emotions
music
in the
was your
songs. And
friends.
so,
Wow.
yeah. And so this is why I use music, because I want people to feel that queer joy and know that they are loved, they're not alone. And also to clap back a little bit at some of the people who are haters, because let's face it, I've been a hater. I know what that's like because I didn't love myself enough. I didn't know I could love myself. I didn't know I was worth love. And I think some of the hate comes from that perspective. I don't know if it's all, but I know that's where I came from. And so I want people to feel that love and feel connected and hopefully feel that connection in that music so that they can feel a little more love. And so why am I saying all this? Because I can't tell you how many times I feel like I throw stuff out into the internet. I go to events and pride events, and I think to myself, what's the point of any of this, Wendy? Why do you do this podcast? Why do you do this? Why? And so I think, like, what's the point, right? Why do I work on these videos and the music and all that? And then I have someone comes up to me and says this one thing, or this slides into my DM and says this quote or something and says, wow, I was thinking about being da da da, and I heard your song. It just made me feel a little more loved, or I feel like I'm not the only one. And I feel like that's the consistent message, right? Building community, in this case, digitally, right? Through social media.
Yeah.
It's
But
so
this is where
important.
we're at. We're in a digital world and but you're not only reaching people digitally. I saw you live and it was just a tremendous performance. Something that you just said, I'm going to roll it back a little bit. I would have never thought for 1 minute someone like you who does what you do would ever think, why am I doing this? I never feel that way. I never feel that way. If I couldn't embrace each day thinking I can make a difference, because I can. I can walk down the street with my dog and meet someone else with a great dog and have a great conversation. I can also walk down my street where they all have their earbuds in and they're in their phone. And I'd like to rip the earbuds out of their ear and smack the phone. Yes, I just said that hostile comment because they are deliberately non-connecting. Walking your dog, and I know you have a dog because I went through your Instagram. Walking your dog is such a pure way to just meet people. Why am I on this earth? Why am I walking the dog? Why do I do my podcast? Why are you a performer? Because that's what we can put out into the universe. That's all we have. That's all we can control. This political thing that we're going through right now, which is super ugly, I can only control it from the degree that I can.
Yeah.
But it's huge.
Thank you so much for saying that and rolling it back there, because for me, it's true. I mean, I used to call it imposter syndrome, and
Yeah, I've heard
research.
people talk about that. Yeah, I
Yeah,
know.
and research. I'm going to talk about two things, if that's okay. One is the imposter syndrome. I've seen people who say that this Black female therapist said that she's never met a Black man with imposter syndrome. She's never met a Black woman with imposter syndrome. And then she goes on to say, it's not imposter syndrome. It's what the world has actually told you over and over again. It's not there's something wrong with you. It's the world has told you this over and over again.
Right.
And there's research around this called minority stress. And within the LGBTQIA plus communities, there's this thing called soji stress. So if you haven't heard about this and you felt some of this, maybe you as a listener or viewer, maybe you might look this up. It's called soji, SOGI.
I never heard the terminology before.
Yeah, sexual orientation, gender identity, stress. And one of the things that sticks out the most for me is that there's an expectation of rejection. Even if it's the most warm, welcoming circle, there's an expectation of rejection. And it's not quite imposter syndrome. We live in a world where we're constantly told we don't exist. In fact, if you want to go back to political, my government says that we don't exist. My government is actively erasing the team.
150%.
And so what kind of psychological abuse is happening and helping me think there is something wrong with me. I don't belong. And so I don't know, maybe I've imbibed enough of that. And so maybe that's why I still have this feeling when I'm on making my songs or when I'm in the classroom. I walk through life generally feeling like, why am I doing this? Will it even make a difference? And my answer to that, and I know I'm not the only creative person or person who feels like this, but I do know that I rest on the faith that I have to do this for me.
Yes.
Right. I'm doing this for me. And then sometimes I get people, again, they come up to me on the street or slide into my DM or whatever, and they really make my day because I wish I had some of your energy, Wendy, because I have no idea. I keep going, why am I doing this? It's not going to help anyone. But yeah, sometimes I get those little glimpses and that's helpful.
But you also, okay, but with like Instagram, people comment, I went through your Instagram page because some people send me like bios that could be made into a book. I didn't get that from you. But I love going through people's social media because I find sometimes jewels about people in their social media. And I love that. I find authentic comments and things like that. And, I went through yours and you have a message to share with people. You have a commentary to share with people. And even on social media, you're entertaining, you're charismatic. So I would never think for one moment that you would think, oh, gee, why am I doing this? When every time you put up one of those posts, you've affected somebody.
Oh my goodness. I love hearing that from you. And I think I'm not the only one who feels this way. And I think that's why it's important to say this out loud, which is I feel like that all the time.
Yeah.
But I think the most important lesson I've learned is even if I feel that way, it doesn't make it true, right? It doesn't mean that it's true. I can have the feeling and I can still keep going.
Right. Well, and I'm sure there's things, let's talk about like outside interference, the static, when the static like really builds up. And I do all kinds of things so that doesn't happen. I know you meditate. You probably meditate way more than I do, but I also meditate. I'll look at a bunch of things on my phone because to do podcasts, I have another podcast I do. You need to know stuff. So I look at them, but I never put news on the television because that's a whole other medium. The wording they use, and it's like shock jocks, right? It's shocking terminology. Oh my God, Wall Street plummeted today, or Wall Street was soaring today. It's using verbiage in such a way that is really harmful to us. You listen to that becomes static. And then when you have too much static in your head, you can't accomplish anything. How can you make feel good when you've got all this negative push-pull in your head?
Beautiful, so wise. I listen to NPR.
I love it
randomly, and that seems to keep me up to date. But I think what's interesting is social media has given me the most information, and I love how social media is all over Katy Perry right now about her space launch. Between you and me, I'm not that concerned about that. I'm not interested in that. Whatever, right? But again, this is also where I have found a way to connect. I think connection is underneath everything that I do, because if I don't feel connected, then there's no point. So one of the things you mentioned earlier is that I have a song, AURE, and it's there's weekly voting for it, right? Right now it's been number 1 for 5 weeks. So thank you all for voting once a week. And if you want to find out more, visit my page, I'll tell you more. But what I do is I connect with people once a week and I say, hey, can you vote? But then I also get to connect with them for real. I'm using it as an opportunity to also say, hey, what's going on? How was your week? Right? Because we don't get the same kind of, I don't get the same kind of check-ins. And so I think any opportunity to have real connections is important, whether that's walking the dog,
Mm-hmm.
or maybe I have my headset on because I'm listening to a song that makes me feel connected, right? So I think it's my job to do what makes me feel connected and to encourage everyone to find what makes them feel connected.
So now you're making me look at the earbuds in a different way, because maybe they're finding their way to connect when they're walking their dog, and I'm judging. Okay. Oh, you can go down a rabbit hole with me. Believe me. Now I'm going to think about this differently, because I've judged them. Why are they walking the dog with earbuds in? And you just told me they are connecting in the way that they have a right to. They have a right to.
That's true. Yeah, good point.
My expectation is they should be earbudless and talk to me because we're walking dogs at the same time. Anyway, I love going down rabbit holes, but I also love to hear your videos. So Juan, if you can put the video, let's just take it away. We have what he sent me.
As you snore away the night, you see through rose-colored glasses, I see only in black and white. We do what we can do to meet in the middle, but the brilliant light twilight seems just a little too little. You're the colors of the rainbow, marching across the sky so bright. Never see the sunrise so early in the morning. If I became a little dusty fairy, you'd be the cloud rain that washes me. You'd be the cloud, you'd be the cloud, you'd be the cloud rain that washes me. Always 2 steps ahead of myself. You may have all the answers, what the hell if you share with anyone else? We do what we can do to meet in the middle. When it comes to differences, we got more than just a little. You're the colors of the rainbow, marching across the sky so bright. Never see the sunrise so early in the morning. If I became a glitter dusted fairy, you'd be the cloud rain that washes me. Washes me clean. Oh yeah. Washes me clean. Oh yeah. Can't do to me in the middle. When it comes to differences, we got more than just a little. You're the colors of the rainbow, marching across the sky so bright. I never see the sunrise so early in the morning. In your eyes, I became a glitter dusted fairy. You'd be the cloud of rain that washes me.
Yes.
Wow. I did not know that was going to happen. What a sweet surprise, Wendy. Thank you.
You sent it to me. You know, if I ask for something and I get it, you know, I use everything, you know, things are meant to be seen. That is such a fabulous piece. And the fact that that was from an event, and not the best film, right? Not a professional video. It is so incredible. The energy, the moment, the words, the choreography, all of it perfect. And it really comes across sitting here in my TV room, bopping to this wonderful music. Really, really great. Really beautiful.
Well, I'm very lucky to have a wonderful producer, Evan and Mason. They're wonderful and they're part of the community and they're here in Riverdale. And you saw my son was in it, Blair. He was the one that was.
I didn't know that was your son. Your son. That's so great. He was fabulous.
Yeah. And then HA is a performer and they are amazing. Yeah. Yeah. It was so much fun to work together on that.
That was Putnam Pride?
Putnam Pride. Yeah. And that was the year before last, actually. Yeah.
Wow.
You don't know. I guess that was last year we did that. Yeah, it was last year. So that song originally was written as a Christmas gift for my partner. And it was talking about how we're so different. But it's actually kind of amazing that we're so different, right? That we find the joys in our differences.
The joy in the difference, right?
Can you keep a secret?
Well, right now you're just telling it to everybody. So it doesn't matter if I keep it or
no. Don't tell anyone. My partner and I since divorced, but it's not all sad. We still have the song and it's all good. It's all okay. But I am single now.
Oh, you are single. Good. And selling on Triversity Talk.
That's right. Love
for sale.
Yeah, but that song was written because of my partner was more of an early bird. I'm more of a night owl. And I wrote the song specifically for him and for us. And when I.Dent.t.T was born, he said, you got to record it. You actually have to record and put that out there. And when I did, it became a different song altogether. It was about finding the differences between people, right? Because don't we do that? I don't know about you, but I do that. I always, what's wrong with them? Or, right, I other people all the time in my head. But really, there is no us and them. There's just us. There is no us and them.
Right. That's interesting that you do that because I love the other. As long as the other is not toxic, so that's why I interview people. And that's why I make documentaries all over. That's why I do it, because I look at a rock and it's interesting to me. I hyper focus on things. I find the differences to be really interesting, especially in human beings. Again, they're not as long as
sounds like you really celebrate the differences, and that's
I celebrate. Absolutely, isn't that great? Isn't that what keeps things interesting? When I walk into a room full of sameness, and you know what I mean by that, it can be a certain ilk or socioeconomic group, and there are differences within them, but it's not as much high lows as like in the worlds I travel through. Oh my God, there's so many extreme people. We were talking about this on our show today, this afternoon. If these walls could talk, everybody who's got like something like out there going on, they all end up in New York. They all do. They're drawn here. They come here from Iowa. They come here from Timbuktu, but they come to New York because they're drawn to it. So I need to know from you. All I heard was you came to New York when you were 17, and that was the last thing. So, like, what was your path? You left home at 17. Where was home?
Well, I grew up in Eastchester and Tuckahoe and New Rochelle. And around 17, a little bit before 17, I had moved out of my family's home. I moved in with my dad. My dad was now living in the States, and he lived in New Rochelle. And then my dad decided he wanted to move to Malaysia for work, and I was not going to Malaysia. I didn't know anything about another country, let alone living in New Rochelle. I was happy to stay there, so that's how I ended up on my own. And I was not
that's
going
really
back to,
interesting, because I was going to say, oh my God, you got to go to, this is a difference. Oh my God, you got to go to, by the time I was 21, I was already in Nigeria. I knew I would always go to Africa. I grew up in the Bronx. You didn't have those kinds of goals because you had everything you needed in the Bronx. So I was very different in my family. I would tell my mother, I'm going to go to Africa. I'm going to become a famous model. I became a model, not in Africa, and I did go to Africa, and I've made so many trips since and made films there. I would have cut my arm off to go to Malaysia. You wanted to stay where it was comfortable for you. I get it.
Yeah. And part of it for me was I never felt fully connected in my area, right? I mean, I went to a Catholic school from pre-K to 8th grade,
I was going to ask where you went to school.
and most of the kids there were white, and I
Right.
thought I was white. Wendy, I drank that Kool-Aid because I thought I was white. I thought if I put just enough gel in my hair, I would
I could be
look
white.
like Vanilla Ice, right? I
Right.
thought if I had just hit puberty, I'm 51, y'all, and this is the hair I have on my arm.
Right.
So like I thought I needed to have hair on my arm, right, to be one of the boys, you know. And so yeah, I grew up in a world where I always felt like I was different, and I was looking to try to find a way to fit in. And I think in my teen years and in my 20s, I was always still trying to fit in, especially discovering my own sexuality and playing with gender as well.
What do you think, like, pardon the pun, helped you find your identity? What factors, what list of factors were working for you to help you discover that?
You know,
And
I
how
think
old-
it's I think it's about finding community. So one of the things I released a song called "The Loft" this past year as
Oh
well.
yeah, right.
And the song is talking about, you know, me going to the LGBT center in White Plains and finding community, finding people who are willing to be vulnerable, right? Brené Brown talks about vulnerability being powerful. Back then, I don't think that was as sexy, right? I mean, vulnerability was not considered something that we should talk about. But in this group of 40 or 50 folks sitting in a room in a circle where
I love
they were
this
talking about their coming out or whatever, I found community and I found home for the first time.
because you found community. Because I know what Eastchester and Westchester is like. I grew up in the Bronx, but my relatives who had done well all lived in Westchester, and I remember how generic white bread it was. But also being a kid from the Bronx, I looked at it and I thought, oh my God, they go to these great sleepaway camps in the summer and everyone dresses really coolly. And yeah, I can only imagine what that was how challenging that was for you. Let's face it, when you're in your teens, you're discovering yourself anyway. So not to have community, trying to fit into a community that really is not going to be yours anyway. I'm
And,
so
and
happy.
one day I would just add that I think for me also it's been a continual process. Like in my 20s and my 30s and my 40s, I've continued, and that's why the name is Identity as a performer, because I continue to find an identity that's more authentically me all
Yeah.
along the way. It's not a static process. It's that constant excavating, right?
Well, I call it the peeling of the layers of the onion. Actually, if you just keep peeling, there's something underneath, and then you peel some more. And yeah, I totally get it. We only have 3 minutes left. I don't know where did the time go. So one quick question: how did you learn to dance and move like that and sing?
Oh my goodness. I don't consider myself a good singer. I see Ricky is here. Ricky's an amazing singer. Um, I'm still practicing, but in regards to the dance, I love dance. And so I would sneak into bars as a kid to try to go dancing. Like when I was 17, I went to gay bars in Rockville Center in Long Island.
God damn.
So yeah, just a lot of just doing what I love, I think.
So we have Ricky Velez on here, and I love Ricky. Ricky's got an amazing voice. Ricky said everyone ought to be asking, what are your pronouns as of 2024? Ricky, we still agree with you. And Ricky said it's hard to change when you're older, but it has to be done for the sake of peace. True, but not everybody can. What is that saying? You can't teach old dogs new tricks. Sometimes you can't, but you can try. Ricky is love is taught the same way hate is taught. It's hard to learn hate when you love. It's also hard to learn love when you hate. He said Wendy always follows the love. I love Ricky. Thank you for telling me he was on here. You can tell how technical I am. I was in private chat, and then I saw you. I don't know how I've been doing this for 4 years. Thank God I have producers on both shows, because I was trying to do it without initially. And I'm not a technical person. I like, nature, flowers. Okay. And because we're down to the wire, what's one piece of business that you want to just share with everyone out there? Something that you're thinking, something to move people forward, something positive. Go.
Oh my goodness. Love yourself to set yourself free. And yeah, I think that's the only way forward. Does that work?
Yeah, no, that totally works. I know. It's like the lightning round, right? Love yourself, set yourself free. And yeah, I completely agree with you there. Thank you, Identity. You are a wonderful guest. I knew you would be. Please go on Instagram, follow I.Dent.t.T. Do we have the spelling correct there?
Yes, it's I.Dent.T.T.
There are a lot of dots. It's like when people give me underscores on there. If I've had a few cocktails, I'm like, nope, I can't deal with this right now. I always like to get my parting picture. So here we go. We'll take a couple.
Hold on, I'll look at the screen.
Yes. Cool. Thank you, Ricky Velez. Love seeing you on here. I love Ricky. You know what? We have an amazing community. I'm wishing you the best with your new song. And are you going to be performing it anywhere that we can?
Yeah. I have a few different Pride events I'll be performing at in June, starting actually May 31st at Tuckahoe Pride.
Okay,
Peekskill Pride, Riverdale Pride, Putnam Pride, and Bronx Pride with Apollonia Cruz. So that'll be fun.
Oh, I know. Well. So I emceed with Tim Moss there 2 years ago. Although Apollonia did invite me to come this year, not to MC, but I did do that 2 years ago. I love Bronx Pride. Apollonia Cruz is the best. An amazing, generous, incredible human being. Thank you so much. Identity.
Thank you so much, Wendy.
Everybody. Good night.
Thanks for creating community here. Be well, everyone.
You got it.